For nearly 10 years, the ranch had stood quiet. The wooden fence posts leaned slightly, weathered by wind and sun. The paint on the old barn had long faded to a dull gray, and the windmill creaked slowly with each gust, as if it were sighing from too many years of waiting. No horses grazed in the pastures, no dogs barked at the gate. The main house, with its wide porch and shuttered windows, seemed almost frozen in time. Inside, dust lay thick on every surface, and the floorboards whispered beneath the weight of footsteps long gone. Nature was slowly reclaiming it. Tall weeds pushed through the cracks in the paths, and the smell of dry grass and earth hung in the air, heavy and familiar. The man who owned the ranch, Elijah, visited only occasionally. He had inherited the land from his father, who had passed away quietly one winter, leaving him with a property that was beautiful but demanding. Elisha had never asked for it, yet he felt bound to it, partly out of respect for his family and partly because it was all he knew. For years he had tried to ignore it, letting it stand empty while he lived in town, working odd jobs and keeping mostly to himself. But no matter how far he ran, the ranch pulled at him, a quiet reminder that the land had a life of its own and would not stay empty forever. The silence of the ranch was deep, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. On summer afternoons, the wind would move through the dry grasses and the trees that lined the property, making a soft rustle that felt almost like a conversation with itself. Elijah often imagined voices in the walls, echoes of the past. Sometimes he could almost see the shadows of people who had lived there long ago, the children who ran barefoot across the fields, the women cooking in the kitchen, the men working the soil before the sun rose. But those were only memories, half-formed and fading. Now, the ranch was a hollow space, filled with nothing but air and the slow passing of days. Yet, there was something comforting about its emptiness. Elijah liked the way the sun hit the roof in the late afternoon, painting golden lines across the barn doors. He liked the smell of earth after rain, the way it made the grass grow just a little greener. And he liked the wind, even when it howled through the fields, carrying dust and dry leaves in swirling patterns. These were small pieces of life he could still touch, and they made him feel, in some quiet way, that he belonged to the place. Despite the peace it offered, the ranch was a heavy responsibility. The fences needed repairs, the old irrigation system leaked in several places, and the barn roof was full of small holes that let in rain. Every visit Elijah made, he would find something new that required his attention. It was hard work, sometimes exhausting, but he found a strange satisfaction in it. Fixing something, even a broken hinge on a gate, made him feel connected to the land and to the people who had once tended it. It was as if he was keeping a promise that no one else had remembered to make. Most of the nearby neighbors were gone too. Some had moved to town for jobs. Others had sold their land after failing to make it productive. The nearest family lived miles away, separated by fields and the occasional lonely tree. During the long months of winter, Elijah would sit in the main house, staring at the fireplace and listening to the wind. He had few visitors, and those who came were usually strangers looking for work or curious about the land. Conversation was sparse and polite, and after they left, the silence returned, thick and heavy as ever. Elijah was not a man used to loneliness in the traditional sense, though. He had friends in town and he spoke with them regularly, but the ranch demanded something different, a kind of presence that could not be faked. Here there were no distractions, no errands to run, no townspeople to chat with. The land required patience and attention, and it demanded honesty from anyone who set foot on it. You could not ignore it or pretend it was something else. The ranch simply existed, and in doing so, it revealed truths about those who tried to claim it. He remembered the first night he had stayed on the ranch alone, just after his father's funeral. The house felt enormous, almost like it was breathing around him. The shadows of the rooms stretched long and thin across the walls. He could hear the wind passing through the cracks in the windows and the floorboards groaning as if waking from a long sleep. At first, the quiet had terrified him. He imagined all kinds of things moving in the dark, but as the night stretched on, he realized that the sounds were nothing more than the house settling, the wind moving through open spaces, and the distant call of an owl. Over time, the silence became a companion, steady and unjudging. Spring brought its own beauty. The pastures that had been brown and brittle through winter began to show green shoots. The old apple trees bloomed in pale pinks and whites, their petals falling softly onto the ground. Birds returned, filling the air with song. Elijah would wander the fields, noticing the way the sun touched the hills, how the streams reflected the light, and how the air smelled fresh and alive after a rain. These moments reminded him that the land was not empty. It was waiting, quietly, for the right time and the right people to awaken it. Despite the charm and peace, the ranch had a reputation in town. People whispered that it was cursed or unlucky, that anyone who tried to live there would be lonely or fail. Elijah never believed it, but he understood why others said it. The land did not forgive neglect. It did not welcome laziness. It required effort, and those unprepared for it would soon leave, disappointed and exhausted. For him, this was not a curse, but a challenge, and it gave him purpose. It gave him a reason to return, year after year, even when it was easier to stay away. And so, the ranch waited. It waited for seasons to pass, for storms to blow in, and for the sun to shine again. It waited for work, for hands willing to mend fences and care for the land. It waited for life, and in that waiting, it held a quiet hope, a small promise that the emptiness was not permanent, that something, someone, would come to fill the spaces with movement, sound, and purpose once more. Elijah often wondered if he would be alone forever, tending this land that belonged to him, yet seemed to belong to no one. But he did not mind entirely. The ranch had a rhythm he had come to understand, a slow, steady heartbeat that matched his own. It was not exciting, nor was it dramatic. It was simply life, measured in the passing of seasons, the turning of the windmill and the growth of the grass. And for him, that was enough. Little did he know, the quiet that had defined the ranch for so long was about to change in ways he could never have expected. The stillness that had settled over the past 10 years was about to be broken. And when it was, everything about the ranch and Elijah's life would be different. The day the sisters arrived, the sky was heavy with clouds, the kind of sky that made the land look darker than it really was. Elijah stood on the porch of the main house, watching the horizon. He had been fixing a broken fence post all morning, and his hands were still rough and sore. The ranch had been quiet for years, and he was used to the silence. Even the wind seemed softer than usual. He had just finished tightening the last nail when he saw them. 4 figures moving slowly across the field, their shapes thin and tired. At first he thought they were travelers passing by, but then he noticed the way they walked, careful, steady, as if they were saving their strength. They were not riding horses or driving a wagon. They were walking, and the distance they had covered was clear in their posture. Elijah felt a strange feeling in his chest. He did not know these people, and yet he could not ignore the way their presence made the ranch feel less empty. The silence that had been so familiar suddenly felt heavy, like a room that had been closed for too long. The sisters reached the gate and stopped. They did not call out. They simply stood there, watching, as if they were trying to decide whether the place was safe. Elijah walked down the porch steps slowly, keeping his hands open and visible, a gesture of peace. He did not want to scare them away, but he also did not want to appear weak or uncertain. "Hello," he called, his voice low. The wind carried his words in a thin line across the field. The eldest sister stepped forward. She was tall and strong, with dark hair pulled back tightly. Her face was serious, and her eyes held a quiet determination. She looked at Elijah for a long moment before speaking. "Sir," she said, her voice calm, "we need a place to stay." Elijah nodded slowly. "This is my land," he said. "It has been empty for a long time." "We know," she replied. "That is why we came." The second sister, a little younger, stood behind her. She looked around at the ranch with wide eyes, taking in the old buildings and the open land. She seemed tired, but there was a spark in her eyes, like someone who had not yet given up hope. The third sister held a small bag close to her chest. She was quiet, almost shy, but her eyes were sharp and alert. The fourth sister, the youngest, stood slightly apart, her hands clasped together. She looked like she wanted to speak, but did not know how. Elijah studied them carefully. They looked like they had been traveling for days. Their clothes were worn and their boots were covered in dust. Their skin was sun-browned, and their hair looked like it had not been washed in a long time. Yet there was something about them that felt different from the usual travelers he saw in town. These women were not just passing through. They were searching for something. "Do you have water?" the eldest sister asked. "We have been walking for days." Elijah hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, come in." He walked to the gate and opened it wide. The sisters stepped through slowly, their eyes moving across the ranch as if they were memorizing every detail. They did not rush. They moved like people who knew how to survive without wasting energy. Elijah led them to the porch. He did not invite them inside yet. He needed to see who they were and what they wanted. He could not risk letting strangers into the house without knowing more, but he also did not want to push them away. He set out a few glasses and filled them with water. The sisters drank quietly, their movements careful. Elijah watched them closely, noticing the small things, the way the eldest sister's hands trembled slightly, the way the second sister kept looking toward the horizon, the way the third sister held her bag tightly as if it contained something precious, the way the youngest sister's eyes looked tired but hopeful. When they finished drinking, the eldest sister spoke again. "Thank you," she said. "We are not asking for charity." Elijah nodded. "I understand. We need work," she continued. "And we need a place to stay. We can do the work here. We can fix things. We can help with the land." Elijah felt a surprise he did not expect. He had not planned on hiring anyone. He had been living alone for years, and the idea of sharing his land with others was strange. Yet the thought of having help was also comforting. The ranch was large, and the work was endless. He had always wanted the land to be alive again, but he had never had the energy to make it happen. "What kind of work can you do?" he asked. The eldest sister looked at him and smiled faintly. "We can do many things," she said. "We can repair fences. We can work with animals. We can cook. We can clean. We can plant. We can carry water. We can do anything that is needed." Elijah nodded slowly. "Why 4 of you?" The eldest sister looked down for a moment, as if she was thinking about how much to share. Then she looked up again and spoke with a calm, steady voice. "We are sisters," she said. "We travel together. We do not leave one another behind. We have been through hard times. We do not want to split up. We need to stay together." Elijah felt a sudden respect for her. The way she spoke showed strength, not only in her words, but in her silence. She was not begging. She was simply stating the truth. "What happened to you?" Elijah asked quietly. The eldest sister paused. She looked at the ranch, at the land, at the sky. Then she said, "We lost our home. We lost our work. We lost our safety. We have nowhere else to go." Elijah listened. He did not ask for details. He knew enough. In a world where people were often pushed out of their homes, there were always stories of unfairness and loss. Sometimes the reasons were simple. Sometimes they were complicated. But the result was the same. People ended up walking, searching for a place where they could feel safe again. The second sister stepped forward. "We heard about this place," she said. "We heard it was empty. We thought maybe you would let us stay. We did not want to bother you. We only wanted a chance." Elijah looked at her carefully. There was something in her voice that made him think she was not just speaking for herself. She was speaking for the others too. She was carrying the weight of their hope. He looked back at the ranch, at the quiet fields and the old buildings. He thought about how long it had been empty. He thought about the work he had done alone. He thought about the loneliness he had felt. He thought about the way the land seemed to be waiting for someone to return. Finally, he spoke. "But you must understand something. But you must understand something. This is not a hotel. This is not a place for strangers to come and leave whenever they want. This land needs care. If you stay, you will work. You will help." The sisters nodded quickly. They looked relieved, like a weight had been lifted. The youngest sister finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "We will do whatever you ask," she said. "We just need a chance." Elijah nodded. "All right," he said. "But I need to know your names." The eldest sister looked at her sisters. Then she spoke. "I am Naeli," she said. "This is my sister, Ayana. This is Kiona. And this is little Sani." Elijah repeated their names slowly, letting them settle in his mind. He felt a strange sense of connection, as if the ranch had finally found its missing pieces. He led them inside the house, finally. The inside was dusty, but clean. The sisters looked around with quiet interest. They did not complain. They did not ask for more. They simply looked at the rooms, as if imagining how they could make them better. Elijah showed them a few rooms where they could sleep. He did not offer them the best room. He offered them the room that was most practical, closest to the kitchen and the back door. He knew they would need to move quickly if they had to leave. After they settled in, Elijah sat at the table and watched them. He felt a strange mix of emotions. He felt cautious, but also hopeful. He felt uncertain, but also strangely calm. He did not know if this was the right choice, but he knew he could not ignore the sisters. They had come to him not asking for much, but asking for something real. Outside, the wind continued to blow, and the ranch seemed to breathe again. The silence was no longer complete. The sound of footsteps, the soft voices of the sisters, and the movement of people working in the fields began to fill the air. That night, Elijah did not sleep much. He lay in bed, listening to the house and to the sisters. He wondered what tomorrow would bring. He wondered if he had made a mistake. He wondered if he was ready to open the ranch again after so many years. But deep inside, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. A sense of purpose. The ranch had not been empty for 10 years because it was forgotten. It had been waiting for someone to bring it back to life. And now, for the first time in a long time, it seemed like the waiting was over. The next morning, Elijah woke up early. The house was quiet, but it felt different. It was no longer just his home. It was now shared, even if only by 4 women he barely knew. The air smelled faintly of dust and soap. The sisters were already awake, moving quietly in the kitchen. Elijah could hear the soft sound of a pot being set down and the gentle clink of a spoon. He got dressed and walked into the kitchen. The sisters were already preparing a simple breakfast of eggs and bread. They moved with practiced efficiency as if they had been cooking together for years. Elijah watched them for a moment, feeling the strange comfort of watching people work together. The ranch had been empty for so long that the sound of activity felt almost foreign. "Good morning," Elijah said. "Ah, ah, ah." Nayeli looked up and smiled slightly. "Good morning," she replied. "We thought we should start early. There is much to do." Elijah nodded.
"Yes," he said. "There is." After breakfast, the sisters gathered their tools and followed Elijah outside.
He had already made a list in his mind of the things that needed fixing. The fence was broken in several places. The windmill needed oil. The barn door was stuck. The old well needed cleaning. It was a long list, and he knew it would take time. But he also knew something else. He could not just give them work without understanding their situation. He needed to know what it meant for them to stay here. He needed to understand what they were asking for when they said they wanted to stay. It was more than shelter. It was more than work. It was a change in their lives, and it would change his life too. They worked together for most of the morning. The sisters moved with strength and care. They listened to Elijah's instructions and followed them closely. When one of them did not understand, another sister would quietly explain. Their teamwork was natural, like a dance. It was clear they were used to relying on each other. At midday, they took a break. Elijah sat on a wooden log near the barn and watched them rest. They drank water and ate bread, their faces tired but calm. The second sister, Ayanna, sat beside him and looked at the fields. "This place is big," she said softly. "It is different from where we were." Elijah nodded. "Yes," he said. "It is bigger than most people can manage alone." Ayanna looked at him for a long moment.
"That is why we came," she said. "We knew we would need help."
We knew we would need a place that was not crowded, a place where we could work and be safe.
Elijah looked at her carefully. "Safe from what?" he asked.
Ayanna did not answer immediately. She looked down at her hands and then back up at him. "From being moved again," she said quietly. "From losing everything." "From being told we do not belong?" Elijah felt a heavy feeling in his chest. He had never thought about how people could be moved, forced to leave, simply because others decided they did not belong. He had never thought about how easy it was for a person to lose everything, even their home, even their work, even their safety. The sisters had not come to him simply because they needed work. They had come because they needed a place where they could stay without being pushed out again. They needed stability. They needed a future. Elijah stood up slowly. "Come with me," he said. He led them to the old office in the main house. It was a small room with a desk and a few drawers. The desk was covered in dust, and the drawers were empty. Elijah opened one of the drawers and pulled out a stack of papers. There were old documents, records of the ranch, the land, and the work that had been done there years ago. "These are the papers," he said. "The ranch is mine, but it is not just mine. It belongs to the land. It belongs to the work. It belongs to anyone who is willing to care for it." Nayeli stepped closer and looked at the papers. "What does it mean to claim us?" she asked. Elijah hesitated. He had been thinking about this since they arrived. He had been trying to find a way to help them without becoming responsible for their entire lives. But now, looking at them, he realized that helping them meant accepting responsibility. It meant that he could not simply give them a place to sleep and a job. He had to give them stability and legal protection.
It means, Elijah said slowly, that I would be responsible for you.
Not in a controlling way, in a caring way. It means you would be part of the ranch. You would have a place here. You would have a name on the records. You would not be forced to leave. Nayeli listened carefully. She looked at her sisters, then back at Elijah. "That is what we want," she said. "We do not want to be moved again." Elijah nodded. "It will not be easy," he said. "It will take time and effort, and it will change my life too." The sisters did not hesitate. They understood. They had already accepted that life was not easy. They had already lived through hard times. They knew what it meant to work for something.
"We are ready," Nayeli said.
Elijah felt a sudden respect for her. She spoke with calm certainty, not with fear. She was not asking for help out of weakness. She was asking for help out of survival. That afternoon, Elijah walked them through the process. He explained the paperwork, the local rules, and the responsibilities. He spoke carefully, making sure they understood. He did not want to make promises he could not keep. He did not want to create hope that would later turn into disappointment. He also explained what he expected from them. He expected honesty, hard work, and respect for the land. He expected them to care for the ranch as if it were their own. He expected them to treat the animals with kindness. He expected them to follow the rules, not because he was forcing them, but because the land demanded it. The sisters listened.
"Well, great time."
They did not interrupt. They did not argue. They simply nodded, accepting the truth. It was clear that they had already learned the value of rules and hard work. When the day was almost over, Elijah took them to the edge of the property. He showed them the boundaries, the fences, the areas that needed work. He showed them the water sources and the fields that could be planted. He pointed out the old barns and the areas that could be repaired. "This is your home now," he said quietly. Nayeli looked at the land, her eyes shining slightly. Nayeli talked to her. "It is beautiful," she said. Elijah felt a small smile appear on his face. "Yes," he said, "it is." That night, the sisters sat together in the kitchen, talking softly. Elijah could hear their voices as he walked past the door. They spoke about their past, their hopes, and their plans. It was the first time the ranch had heard real conversation in years. The sound was not loud or bright, but it was alive. Elijah stood outside for a moment, looking up at the sky. The stars were bright, shining above the land. He felt a quiet sense of peace. He had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to share life with others. He had forgotten what it felt like to have a purpose that was not only his own. He knew the road ahead would be difficult. The work would be hard. The paperwork would be long. There would be days of doubt and days of struggle. But he also knew something else. He knew that for the first time in a long time, the ranch had a future. And that future did not belong to him alone. The first days after the agreement were quiet but busy. Elijah woke up early, as he always did, and the sisters were already awake. The house no longer felt empty. It was filled with small sounds, pots clinking, footsteps on the floor, the soft murmur of conversation. The air felt warmer, as if the presence of people had changed the whole place. Elijah began to teach them how the ranch worked. He showed them where the water came from, how to keep the animals fed, and how to fix the fences. He did not treat them like strangers. He treated them like workers and partners. He was careful to show respect. He knew that respect was not only about words. It was about the way he spoke, the way he listened, and the way he trusted them. The sisters learned quickly. They were not strangers to hard work. They had lived with limited resources and had learned to make the best of what they had. They understood the value of time and effort. They knew that work was not something to be avoided. It was something to survive. The first task was repairing the fence around the pasture. The old posts were weak, and the wire was loose. Elijah and the sisters worked together, lifting posts, tightening wires, and digging holes. The sun was hot, and the sweat ran down their faces, but they did not complain. They worked in silence, letting their actions speak louder than their words. At one point, the youngest sister, Sani, dropped a nail. She bent down to pick it up, and her finger shook slightly. Elijah noticed. He walked over and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked. Sani looked up, her eyes wide.
Yes, she said quickly. I'm fine. Elijah nodded.
He did not push her. He knew she was tired. She had been traveling for days, but he also knew that if they were going to live here, she would need to trust him. Trust was not something that could be demanded. It had to be earned. Later that day, they moved to the barn. The barn door was stuck, and the wood was swollen from years of weather. Elijah showed them how to lift the door slowly, how to clean the tracks, and how to use oil to make it move smoothly. The sisters worked together, and the door finally opened with a soft groan. When the door opened, dust rose in a thin cloud. The sisters coughed and laughed softly. It was the first sound of joy the ranch had heard in a long time. They looked inside the barn, and their faces changed. The barn was empty, but it held possibilities. "We can fix this," Nayeli said quietly. "We can make this a place for animals," Elijah nodded. "Yes," he said, "we can." After the barn, they moved to the garden area. Elijah had not planted anything in years, and the soil was dry and hard. The sisters worked together, digging small holes, adding water, and planting seeds. The work was simple, but it was meaningful. It was a sign that the land was not only for surviving, but for growing. As they worked, Elijah began to notice small changes in the sisters. They were becoming more relaxed. Their shoulders were not as tense. Their faces were not as serious. They began to laugh more, and they began to speak more. It was not a loud conversation. It was not a busy conversation. It was quiet and natural, like the sound of a river moving through stones. One evening, after a long day of work, Elijah sat on the porch and watched the sisters. They were preparing dinner in the kitchen. He could hear the sound of chopping and the soft laughter of the sisters. It was a simple sound, but it filled the house with life. Elijah thought about the past. He thought about the years of silence. He thought about the emptiness. He wondered if he had been wrong to keep the ranch empty for so long. He wondered if he had been afraid of responsibility, afraid of being connected to others. The sisters were not perfect. They had their own differences. Sometimes they disagreed. Sometimes they argued quietly, but they always found a way to work together. Their disagreements were not loud or angry. They were calm and honest, like people who had learned that anger only makes life harder. One afternoon, Nayeli and Elijah were working on the windmill. The windmill had been broken for years, and the water tank was empty. Elijah explained how the windmill worked, how the blades turned, and how the water was pumped into the tank. Nayeli listened carefully, asking questions when she did not understand. "Why did you keep this place empty?" Nayeli asked. "Why did you keep this place empty?" Elijah paused. He did not want to lie. He did not want to pretend he had a simple answer. "I did not know what to do with it," he said finally. "I was afraid. I did not want to fail. I did not want to be alone." Nayeli looked at him quietly. "You are not alone anymore," she said softly. Elijah felt a warmth in his chest. It was not a romantic warmth. It was not a dramatic warmth. It was a simple warmth, like the feeling of being understood. He nodded, but he did not speak. As the weeks passed, the sisters began to take on more responsibilities. They learned how to feed the animals, how to clean the stalls, and how to manage the small tasks that kept the ranch running. Elijah began to trust them more. He began to rely on them. He began to see them not just as workers, but as people who were part of the land. One day, a neighbor came by. He was a man who lived several miles away. He had heard that the ranch was no longer empty. He was curious. He wanted to see if the rumors were true. When he saw the sisters working, he was surprised. He had expected to see a man working alone, like Elijah had been. He had not expected to see 4 women working together, managing the land. He asked Elijah how they had come to live there. Elijah explained the situation honestly, without hiding anything. The neighbor listened. He did not judge. He did not criticize. He simply nodded. "It is good to see the land alive again," the neighbor said. "It has been empty for too long." Elijah felt a sense of relief. He realized that not everyone would understand or accept the situation. But he also realized that he did not need everyone's approval. He only needed to do what was right. The sisters continued to work, and the ranch continued to change. The land began to look more cared for. The fields looked greener. The fences looked stronger. The barn looked more useful. The house looked cleaner. More importantly, the sisters began to feel like they belonged. They began to feel safe. They began to feel like they had a future. One evening, Elijah walked into the kitchen and found the sisters sitting at the table. They were not working. They were not preparing food. They were simply sitting together, talking quietly. Nayeli looked up at Elijah and smiled. "Thank you," she said. Elijah paused. "For what?" he asked. "For giving us a chance," Nayeli said. "For letting us stay. For trusting us." Elijah felt a deep emotion he did not fully understand. He felt proud. He felt humble. He felt grateful.
"You earned it," Elijah said quietly. Nayeli nodded.
She looked at her sisters, and they all smiled. It was a small moment, but it felt important. It felt like a turning point. The ranch was no longer a place of emptiness. It was a place of life. That night, Elijah stood outside again, looking at the stars. He thought about how much had changed in a short time. He thought about the hard work, the long days, and the quiet nights. He thought about the sisters and the way they had brought life back to the ranch. He knew that there would be more challenges ahead. There would be days of doubt. There would be days when the work seemed too much. There would be days when the sisters missed their old home and felt the pain of the past. But he also knew something else. He knew that they were not alone. They had each other. They had the land. They had a future. And for the first time in years, the ranch felt truly alive. Months turned into seasons, and the ranch continued to grow. The work never stopped, but the sisters and Elijah had learned to share the load. The ranch no longer felt like a place that waited for someone to return. It had become a place that belonged to the people who lived there. In the beginning, Elijah had been careful. He had kept the sisters in the simple rooms, and he had not given them too much freedom. He had wanted to make sure they were safe, and he had wanted to make sure they understood the rules of the land. But as time passed, he began to trust them more. He saw their dedication, their honesty, and their respect for the ranch. He began to see them as more than workers. He began to see them as family. The sisters, too, began to feel a new kind of confidence. They were no longer afraid of being moved. They were no longer worried that someone would tell them they did not belong. They were no longer uncertain about their future. The ranch had given them a home, and they had given it back in return. One of the first big changes was the garden. The sisters had planted vegetables and herbs, and they had started a small orchard. They cared for it carefully, watering it each day and protecting it from the wind. Slowly, the garden began to grow. The first vegetables were small, but they were fresh and healthy. The sisters were proud of what they had accomplished. Elijah watched the garden with a quiet smile. He had never been much of a gardener, but he could see the value in it. The garden meant food, but it also meant stability. It meant that the land could provide for the people who lived there. The animals also returned. Elijah had not had livestock for years, but now he began to bring in a few cows and chickens. The sisters helped with the animals, feeding them, cleaning their pens, and making sure they were healthy. The ranch began to feel like a real working farm again. At first, the work was difficult. There were days when the weather was harsh, and the tasks seemed endless. There were days when the sisters missed their old home and felt the pain of the past. Elijah could see it in their eyes. He could see the way they would stare at the horizon, as if remembering something they could not forget. One evening, Elijah found Naeli sitting alone near the old fence. She was looking at the land, her face quiet. He sat beside her and waited. He did not ask questions. He simply sat with her, sharing the silence. After a while, Naeli spoke. "I miss my home," she said softly. Elijah nodded. "I understand," he said. "It is not easy to leave everything behind." Naeli looked at him. "But this place is different," she said. "This place feels like it could be ours, not just a place to stay, but a place to belong." Elijah felt a warmth in his chest. He realized that the ranch was no longer only his land. It was becoming something shared. It was becoming a place where people could build a life. As time passed, Elijah began to involve the sisters in decisions about the ranch. He asked their opinions about what to plant, how to fix the buildings, and how to manage the animals. He listened carefully. He did not make decisions alone anymore. The ranch had become a shared responsibility. The sisters also began to build stronger bonds with each other. They were already close, but living together on the ranch deepened their connection. They learned each other's habits, their strength, and their weaknesses. They began to trust each other in a new way. They began to rely on each other not just for survival, but for emotional support. One day, a local official came to the ranch. He was responsible for land records and legal agreements. Elijah had invited him to discuss the paperwork needed to officially register the sisters as residents of the ranch. The sisters were nervous, but they were also hopeful. The official looked at the ranch carefully. He walked through the property, inspecting the buildings and the land. He asked Elijah questions about the work, the animals, and the future plans. Then he turned to the sisters. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked. "If you are registered here, you will have rights. You will have a stable home."
But you will also have responsibilities. Naeli nodded.
"We understand," she said.
The official nodded slowly. "Very well," he said. "I will begin the process." Elijah felt a relief he could not explain. He had been worried about the legal side of things. He had been worried that the sisters would be turned away or forced to leave. But now it seemed like their future was becoming real. The process took time. It required documents, signatures, and meetings, but the sisters were patient. They did not rush. They understood that good things often took time. During this time, the ranch continued to grow. The sisters worked hard. They became more skilled. They learned how to repair tools, how to manage the land, and how to plan for the future. Elijah watched them with quiet pride. One day, Elijah realized something. He realized that he had changed too. He was no longer the man who visited the ranch only occasionally. He was no longer the man who feared responsibility. He was no longer the man who kept the land empty because he was afraid of failing. He had become someone who cared deeply about the people who lived there. He had become someone who understood that life was better when shared. He had become someone who had found purpose. The sisters also saw the change in him. They saw how he smiled more often. They saw how he spoke more softly. They saw how he began to share stories from his past. He began to open up, slowly, in small ways. One evening, as the sun was setting, the sisters sat on the porch with Elijah. They had finished their work for the day, and the air was cool. They looked at the land, and the sky turned pink and orange. Nayeli spoke softly. "We never thought we would find a place like this," she said. "We never thought we would find people who would trust us." Elijah looked at her. "You earned that trust," he said. Ayana nodded. "We did," she said. "But you also gave us a chance. You believed in us." Kiona smiled. "We are grateful," she said. "We are not just surviving anymore.
We are living. Sani, the youngest, looked at the stars and smiled.
I feel safe here," she said. "I feel like I can stay." Elijah felt a deep emotion in his chest. He realized that this was what he had been waiting for, even if he did not know it. He had been waiting for a reason to care again. He had been waiting for a place to belong. He had been waiting for people who would make the land alive. As the seasons changed, the ranch became known in the nearby town. People began to visit. Some came to buy produce. Some came to offer help. Some came simply to see the ranch that had once been empty. The sisters and Elijah welcomed visitors with respect and kindness. They shared their stories carefully without needing attention or praise. They simply wanted to show that the land could be a place of hope. Years passed and the ranch continued to grow. The garden became larger. The animals increased. The buildings were repaired and improved. The land was no longer empty. It was full of life, work, and purpose. And in the center of it all was the bond between Elijah and the four sisters. They were not related by blood, but they were family in every way that mattered. They had come to the ranch as strangers, seeking a place to stay. They had stayed because they found a home. And they had stayed because they found people who believed in them. In the end, the ranch did not only belong to Elijah, it belonged to everyone who lived there. It belonged to the sisters who had come seeking safety. It belonged to the land that had waited patiently for someone to care for it. And it belonged to the future that they were building together. The ranch had stood empty for years, but it was never truly empty. It was waiting. And when the four sisters arrived, it finally found the life it had been waiting for. The ranch had stood empty for years until 4 Apache sisters came, begging him to claim them all.